is Encore.
Cool.
The stories behind the songs.
Thank you.
Here's iHeartRadio's Miles Galloway.
Boy, have I been looking forward to this one. I'm Miles Galloway, sporting a little more eyeshadow than usual. Don't tell my fiancé I stole it. How else was I meant to get into the zone? For this, the story of Evanescence's Bring Me to Life. As the 90s came to an end, rock music was in a very aggressive state. Bands like Deftones, Korn and Limp Bizkit were reaching the Billboard charts with their loud, angry and often rapped vocals, leading the way for a new breed of heavy music that was referred to as nu metal. The arrival of a new millennium didn't slow things down. Thanks to headline-grabbing sets at Woodstock 99, nu metal was full-on in the mainstream. Bands like Linkin Park, Slipknot, Disturbed and System of a Down were emerging, each offering their own version of the subgenre. And in the year 2000, nu metal was actually challenging the likes of Britney, NSYNC and Backstreet for the top of the charts. All of a sudden, it didn't feel weird to see Freak on a Leash and Oops, I Did It Again back-to-back on Much Music or MTV. But there was one overwhelming observation with this type of music. It was all just a bit too bro-y, bro. With the exception of Canada's own Kittie, the nu metal scene was dominated by men in backwards baseball caps, dreadlocks, and JNCO jeans. It was time for a change. Little Rock, Arkansas was never really known for having much of a music scene. In fact, the state capital was mostly known for its ties to President Bill Clinton. But in the early 2000s, one band from Little Rock was on the verge of something. As a teenager, Amy Lee was an aspiring songwriter. Music was in the family. Her dad was in a rock band, but gave it up to be a radio disc jockey when Amy was born. Good choice. Growing up in Chicago, Lee was a happy kid, but then her family moved to Little Rock when she was 13 and things changed. Amy described herself as miserable, an outcast who couldn't fit in because she didn't want to dress and act like everyone else. She channeled these feelings, using them to write poetry and music, something she would continue to do throughout the years. She told Much Music's George Strombolopoulos,
Always been open and I've always tried to purge myself of everything. That's just the way I work. And, we've all been through hard times and good times too. But whenever I've gone through a hard time, it's always been for me that I have to instantly just get it out and write it down. I have like 7 journals that I'm keeping right now in my backpack. And, always, everything, I just have to write it down and write exactly how I feel, no matter how awful it sounds. And a lot of our music has come from that kind of purging. That's what it is for me. People meet us sometimes and wonder why we're not like sad or tormented or something. We're not. Like, we're normal people. I'm actually very happy most of the time because I use my music to purge those things.
But that summer in youth camp, she met Ben Moody, a fellow teenager who also felt like he didn't belong. He and Amy hit it off immediately, and eventually they were an item.
We met at camp.
Yeah, they were at camp.
In a very conservative small town. And we found each other because we were both different. I guess we stood out. And we're both musicians. So we began writing together right away.
With Amy on piano and Ben on acoustic guitar, the two began writing and recording songs that reflected their feelings of teen angst. Amy would also give him songs and ask Ben to make them sound cool. Once they had some songs together, they began performing as a duo in local coffee shops and bookstores. Growing up playing the piano, Amy learned the works of Mozart and Beethoven, who became influences. An even bigger influence was composer Danny Elfman, especially his work on films like Beetlejuice and The Nightmare Before Christmas. He's been a big influence for me, Amy told Westword in 2007. When I started creating Evanescence's music, that was a huge inspiration for me. The Tim Burton movies and all the scores that Danny Elfman had done. At the same time, Amy was also listening to a lot of alternative music that helped shape her own. Artists like Nine Inch Nails, Garbage, Bjork, Nirvana, and Soundgarden allowed her to put together a vision of her own, one that could marry classical music with heavier contemporary rock. She would tell Kerrang in 2019, I started seeing similarities between the drama of classical music and the heavier stuff I was listening to, and I wanted to bring those things together for myself. Amy revealed more about her influences to George Strombolopoulos for Much.
No, we're a very diverse band. Part of that, I think, is the same reason that we can't really place ourselves into a genre, and that's because we pull from all musical styles. We pull from everything, like from rock to classical to gothic to a million things. So, we've always just written to enjoy music because we love it and we love our band, and not to be like anything or to sell anything. We're very genuine.
For the band's name, they chose Evanescence over Childish Intentions and the very metal Stricken, as well as the suffocating Wolves and levitating penguins, which were suggested by Amy's younger siblings. Amy told the Washington Post, "We looked for a lot of different names, and every word was one that was spoken commonly in the English language, and every combination of words would remind us of something else. And because our music is, to us, like nothing else, it was really hard. We wanted a name that was completely out of nowhere, and when we found the word Evanescence, it was beautiful and unused, an untapped thing. I felt like we finally found something that would fit us. With a name decided, Evanescence now just needed to get their music out there." Amy, Lee and Ben Moody wanted to make epic-sounding, ethereal goth rock, and the only thing really standing in their way was a budget and the know-how to pull it off. Amy told the Washington Post, "We didn't have the means to make it sound like we wanted. In our heads, we wanted strings and choirs and all this dramatic, cinematic stuff that we couldn't have because we were just two kids in a basement. We didn't have the ability in the studio, and we didn't have the ability as writers. We had a lot of growing to do." Amy told Much,
We were mastering. We used to always record in the bedroom. Like, we would go to the closet and I'd record vocals, and Ben would be messing with like a 8-track
in your place,
recorder
like in your
in
house?
Ben's apartment when I was in high school.
Evanescence released their first EP titled Evanescence in 1998, followed by the Sound Asleep EP in 99. A local radio station began to play some of their music, which helped them earn a modest following and get some gigs in the area. They remained a duo, however, mainly because they didn't want to ruin the chemistry they built together. Taking some songs from the EPs, they assembled an album of demos that they would call Origin. A funny thing happened when they went to Memphis to master these recordings.
So once we put together this big, I think it was 10 or 11 songs on there. It was like an album, totally awful, just not awful, I hate to say it. It was, just demo recordings. And we were mastering it in Memphis at a mastering studio, and the producer down the hall, who's a new producer starting out, heard it and was like, whoa, because it's different, and listened, and he fell in love with it. And he was like, "I'm going to New York and LA and stuff to talk to them about these other bands that I'm working on. Do you mind if I take your CD with me?" And we're like, "Of course not." So Wind Up heard it, and within a week flew us up there and were talking to us. The rest is history.
With a label interested, Evanescence continued to sell the Origin CD to local shops and at their shows, but they knew it didn't represent the music they truly wanted to make. Amy made it incredibly clear when speaking with Rick Campanelli on a Live at Much session.
Origin is not an album. Should I say that clear? Origin is not an album. We recorded its demos. We recorded it a long time ago, in Ben's apartment and in my parents' attic with an 8-track recorder. It cost about $300. Sounds like crap. Don't feel bad that you don't have it. It's just download it. It looks kind of like an album because we had an artist make us this cool album cover and stuff because we were using it to shop record labels. So we put everything we had on there, and actually some of the songs on there are on Fallen, just done right. So that's why you can't find it. And no, we're not going to really re-release it, but I would consider doing some of those songs over again and putting them on the next album.
With a deal in place with Wind Up Records, best known for signing Creed and Canada's Finger 11, Evanescence were now getting close to living their dream, but things wouldn't come easy for them. Wind Up Records was excited about signing Evanescence because they were such a different band for the moment in music, but they immediately recognized a big problem. They didn't know how to market a band like this. Amy told the Washington Post it was a very unusual thing, and they went out on a limb. They flew us to New York and said, "We've never done this before, but we think you guys have great potential. And we love your music. We love your sound. It's really different, but we don't really totally know what to do with you." The label sent the band to Los Angeles to work on their debut album with producer Dave Fortman. Amy and Ben thought it would only be for 6 months, but in the end it took 2 years. In that time, though, the two learned how to be a proper band. Amy took both singing and acting lessons to help her deal with stage fright. And then Evanescence were blindsided by their label. As the album was coming together, the label threw them a curveball. They wanted a male singer in the band to share vocals with Amy. This was an immediate no-go for Amy and Ben, and when they refused to cooperate, the label pulled the plug on the album and the record deal. So the two of them headed back to Little Rock, and just like that, the dream was apparently over. Flash forward a few weeks, and Wind Up came back with a new offer. If they hired a rapper to contribute vocals to their chosen first single, Bring Me to Life, the label would honor the deal. The two agreed to it, despite preferring Going Under as the first single. They feared listeners would think that the rapper was a full-time member of the band, but they relented. Amy at least wrote the verse that was eventually performed by Paul McCoy of the post-grunge band 12 Stones. Amy would later tell Metal Hammer, "That was not our original plan. It was something that we had to do. It was a concession we had to make for the label. But at least when we did it, I wrote the part. We took a lot of care in creating it the way that we wanted it to be, and I worked with Paul to get it the way that we still felt it fit our band." With the album now complete, Evanescence were still a two-piece. In order to go out on tour and promote the album, they'd need to fill out the rest of the band. So they brought in a couple of Ben's friends, John LeCompte on guitar and Rocky Gray on drums, and hired Will Boyd to play bass. Now they were finally ready to be introduced to the world. But the introduction wouldn't be with the album, it would be through the Marvel universe. The first time listeners would hear anything from Evanescence's studio recordings, it would be on the silver screen. Wind Up put together the soundtrack for Marvel's new Daredevil movie starring Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner, featuring a very rock-heavy roster. It was the perfect opportunity to debut music by Evanescence, and they included 2 songs from the band's forthcoming album, Bring Me to Life and My Immortal. Amy Lee explained the unique situation to Much Music at the time.
Our label, Wind Up Records, was responsible for the soundtrack, and Fox was looking for a female-fronted band because they wanted to identify with Elektra. That's Jennifer Garner's character. And they loved the song, and they love our band. They were really flattering and just impressed with our band, so they decided to use the second song too.
Daredevil was a modest success, but the true standout from the movie and the soundtrack was the music of Evanescence. This aligned nicely for the release of Evanescence's debut album. Fallen arrived just a few weeks after Daredevil, and while things were looking up for Evanescence instantly, they were being labelled 2 things they weren't: a Christian rock band and a new metal band. Thanks to the success of Christian-leaning wind-up acts like Creed and 12 Stones, Fallen was marked as Christian rock and supplied to faith-based stores and radio stations. Despite giving Evanescence a clear bump in sales, the band made their views clear during an interview with Entertainment Weekly, with Amy saying, "I guarantee that if the Christian bookstore owners listened to some of those songs, they wouldn't sell the CD." Wind Up Records chairman Alan Meltzer later issued a statement to retailers explaining that despite having roots within the Christian community prior to the release of Fallen, recent statements by band members have made it abundantly clear that Evanescence is a secular band and view their music as entertainment. No more, no less. As such, we strongly feel they no longer belong in Christian retail outlets. Amy clarified their stance in interviews with Much Music.
We're not really faith-based in our music. We did meet at a youth camp, and I am a Christian, but it's not really related to our music so much, honestly. Our music's about life and many things, and to bring that into it, I think, really alienates some people, and we don't want to do that at all. We're very open-minded, and we're very accepting of everyone, and we don't want to peddle anything. That's really not a big part of it, honestly.
I'm always kind of bothered when you're put in a box. I mean, if you're labeled, it never feels good to be labeled as like a, I don't know, even just in school, like as a nerd or an art brat or whatever. It's like, it's not cool to be labeled, and especially that kind of pissed me off because we're not a Christian rock band. And it's weird though, it's not a big deal. I think the only reason it's been asked so much is that I acted pissed off. It's like they just want to see you get mad. I'm a Christian, and I have nothing to be ashamed of. I think everybody should have their own beliefs, and there's no reason not to feel that way, but it's not what our music is about, and I'm definitely not trying to preach, and most of our music touches on issues a lot of people that are in the Christian rock industry are afraid to touch on, so it wouldn't be right for us to be in the Christian rock industry.
As they tried to distance themselves from any religious association, Evanescence found themselves in the same boat with nu metal. Despite having Paul McCoy rap on Bring Me to Life, there really was no other connection to the subgenre. And yet, if you look at the band's Wikipedia page, or even just do a basic Google search, Evanescence and nu metal have a history. Amy explained to Metal Hammer why it was such a problem for them, saying, "That's one of the reasons we didn't want a rapper in the song in the first place, because it puts us in a box. Since that was our first song, that was the main reason for the fear. Because branching out and trying different things and playing around in the world that is more metal, playing around in the world that is more electronica, playing around a little bit in a classical way, those are all things that this band does. But with the first song, you have to do your best to sum up who you are. You don't give people a false idea of what they're buying into. That was the thing we had to be very careful about. Whether it was called Christian rock, nu metal, goth rock, or even symphonic metal, Bring Me to Life was a massive hit. Any doubts that Wind Up had about Amy carrying the band as the vocalist were immediately put to rest. Not only that, the label looked like fools. The song became an empowering anthem for listeners, but especially girls and women who were unable to identify with other heavy music for its lack of representation. The song also touched on a serious matter, domestic abuse. Amy wrote the song when she was 19, during a time in which she was trapped in a years-long relationship. She told the Boston Phoenix, "I was in a relationship and I was completely unhappy, but I was hiding it. I was being completely abused and I was trying to cover it up. I wouldn't even admit it to myself." It was then that she would confide in her future husband, who helped her realize that she needed out of her current situation. The song went on to become a lifeline and coping mechanism for countless Evanescence fans. Though Amy would tell Rick Campanelli of Much Music,
I think that song can mean a lot of things, and as over the last year we've played it so many times, depending on what I'm going through, and how much I've grown, like, it changes meanings for me. It's like all the time I'm like, oh whoa, it means this today. And when I wrote it, it was about, I was in an abusive relationship for a long time, and I was finally like waking up to realizing it, because you kind of go into denial about things like that. And somebody said something to me. They said, "Are you happy?" And it was like somebody I didn't even know, and just like looked me right in the eyes, and I was like, yeah, I'm cool. And then it made me think about it, and I was like, wow, I'm really unhappy. So I think it's really, to me, at the root of it all, about whatever you're in, whatever cycle, whatever like bad situation or whatever, break out of it. Like, there's nothing holding you down. You are free. If in your mind you're free, you can just go. And it's just set yourself free.
Although Amy didn't name him at the time, years later she revealed that the abusive relationship she was singing about was with Ben Moody, who abruptly left Evanescence over creative differences while the band was on tour in October 2003. Amy would tell Spin magazine, "Ben is all about the drama. He's done a lot of irrational things, so you learn not to be surprised by anything. Ben was a really unhappy person. When you're miserable, you don't want anyone around you to be happy. So with him gone, we felt like a weight had been lifted. I have pictures from that day. We all look giddy." With Ben now out of the group, Amy was now able to take full control of Evanescence and reap the benefits moving forward. To say Evanescence was the most dominant rock band of 2003 is an understatement. Bring Me to Life was not only a big hit for them, it was one of the biggest songs of 2003. It reached number 1 in the UK and number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, an extraordinary achievement for a heavy rock song. It also reached the top 10 in 15 different countries. The song helped Fallen to eventually sell more than 17 million copies worldwide. It currently sits in 6th place of the best-selling albums of the 21st century. I even remember the song being used for the WWE pay-per-view No Mercy back in 2003. That was in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. At the 46th Annual Grammy Awards, Evanescence won Best Hard Rock Performance for Bring Me to Life, as well as Best New Artist. Maybe don't remind 50 Cent. 50 Cent hates my guts, Amy told the Daily Beast. It's just one of those things. I mean, truthfully, we thought he was going to win too. But despite turning 20 years old this year, Bring Me to Life has never really disappeared from the public consciousness. In February 2022, it surpassed the 1 billion views mark on YouTube, an astounding feat for a band of their ilk. And then just months later, with no real explanation, Bring Me to Life resurfaced to top the US iTunes chart, to which the band posted on socials, 19 years and still going strong. Thank you for the love. Going strong for 20 years now, Bring Me to Life has been reborn on Fallen's recently released deluxe remastered edition. To commemorate the platinum anniversary, the band finally got their wish to release a version of Bring Me to Life without any trace of the infamous male rapper, the way it was always supposed to be heard. She should have asked 50 Cent to do it. I'm Miles Galloway, and that was the story of Evanescence's Bring Me to Life on Encore, an iHeartRadio podcast with brand new episodes every Thursday. Okay, I really need to get this eyeshadow off now. Kind of stings.
Encore is an iHeartRadio Canada podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Download the iHeartRadio app for more great podcasts just like these.